My name is Thomas Stehl. I'm working for Trolltech since about 3.5 years. I'm responsible mainly for tools, especially Visual Studio integrations, Assistant, plus minor things in Designer and other tools. Our agenda. So first, we will figure out why we need integrations at all. Next, an overview of existing integrations. Then we will cover Visual Studio, the main features like the integrated form editor, the project management, and help system. Afterwards, we will cover other IDEs. Currently, or what we will cover later, is basically only the Eclipse integration for now. In a couple of years or even earlier, we may integrate another IDEs, depending what's coming up and what we see, what people want, basically. In the end, we have a Q&A session, so feel free to ask what you want. Okay, so why do we need integrations at all? The first point is productivity. You have only one programming environment. You don't have to switch between several applications for achieving several tasks or fulfilling several tasks. So we have, usually when you program, you have an editor where you write your code. You have a form editor or a designer to design your applications. Once you have written code, you have to debug it. Usually there are some bugs. That's why you need a debugger. You have help integration usually, or you have to look at help. You need a source control system for keeping track of your files. The other thing is using of existing and familiar tools. So when you want to use Qt the first time, you don't want to use or have to learn a new IDE. You don't want to leave your old environment where you're really productive working, even if it's Emacs or VI or whatever. And you still want to use third-party tools you once bought or did yourself, actually, on other add-ins, plugins, macros, or whatever. So there are a lot of third-party tools around, like Whole Tomato. We have Incredible, for example, which is used, I guess, by some people who uses it. One? Okay. So it's basically a distributed build system which works on Visual Studio. So if you have a large source code base, you want to build it, then it can compile Qt, for example, in less than 2 minutes, completely. So it's pretty good. So you want to have basically just want to keep your tools, but you also want to have some help for developing Qt applications. Another reason is company policy for tools. You can also rephrase it for please your manager. Usually you get decisions. So one management layer says, okay, now we have Visual Studio, we have invested some money. We can't, or you should use Visual Studio, no other tools. For Visual Studio, it's not the case currently. But what we see is this company policy, especially for Eclipse. So basically, management layer says, okay, Eclipse is a new cool thing, so we should use Eclipse. I guess 95% of developers, C++ developers, wouldn't necessarily switch voluntarily to Eclipse. But still, it's a requirement. Okay, overview of existing integrations. For Visual Studio, we offer two different things. That's a deep integration and add-ins, and then Eclipse. I will explain the differences between the integration and add-ins, because most people mix it up, or some people do not even know that they exist. So the add-ins basically support all versions of Visual Studio, from Visual Studio 6 to 2005. The integration is only available for Visual Studio 2003, 5, and the next one, Orca, and what's coming next. Okay, so the difference, or first where you can find them. The add-ins are located in a package which is called Visual Studio Add-in Collection. That's what you find in your download area when you download Qt. The integration is also a separate package, but this is just labeled VS integration. So that's where you find it. The main differences between an add-in and an integration from the user's perspective is the add-in does not have an integrated form editor. So the add-in works like the add-in in Qt3. It has a button which launches the external designer. Whereas in the integration, we embed the form designer inside Visual Studio, so it looks like we have a WinForms designer, for example. Another difference is the resource editor. It's also not included in the add-in. It's only in the integration. The other big thing the add-in supports, but the integration doesn't support, is Qt3. So if you have to still maintain Qt3 code, or you port your application from Qt3 to 4, then you should actually use the add-in. It shares a lot of code between the add-in and the integration, but it has this small addition to also handle Qt3 projects. In general, there's not a big difference between Qt3 and 4 projects. The main difference is basically, for example, generating mock steps. This is slightly different, and also the custom build rules for UI files. Qt4 support provides both, and also integrated help is available for the add-in and the integration. So there's no difference. The main features of the Visual Studio integration. So it has project and class resets, the integrated form designer, resource management, the project management, and integrated help. First, the wizards. So we provide wizards for the most common types of applications. It's a command line-based application with no GUI involved. It's a GUI application and a template for libraries. You have the possibility to create new wizards. It's unfortunately not documented, but it's possible. It's very similar to the approach how you would create new wizards with a standard C++ project. It's documented in the Visual Studio documentation. And in addition, we ship a Qt project engine library, which is an ActiveX or COM component. And it has several functions. So you can basically say, first create a basic Qt project. Then you say, OK, now I want to add a GUI module, XML module, SQL module, whatever. You can add files, patch files, like changing object names and stuff like that. That's possible. So if you want to do it, go forward. You can also ask me if you need more documentation. And then we have Qt class wizards. I will show it later how it looks like. It's basically when you have a project, and then you decide, oh, now I have to add a new dialog, for example. So what you would have to do is you would have to add first a UI file, a header file, and a CPP file. 3 things. With those wizards, you basically say, what class do you want to generate, the class name? And you'll specify the file names which should be generated, press OK, and you get basically everything set up. So you get 3 files. You get the main inheritance or what you choose or having a member variable with the UI class. And all mock steps and UI build steps will be set up for you. OK, how does it look like? The main visible or the most visible components for the integration are, of course, the form editor. So we have the Qt toolbox, which is this part. It's basically the same one you would see in the standalone designer. This tab widget or tab page you see here entirely, this is the integrated form designer. So it really behaves like a WinForms designer or MFC designer or whatever. We have the object inspector, this here. It's not heavily used. It's the same as in designer. So you can basically, it's like a visualization of the UI file. So you can actually see where do you have a layout, which items are nested in this layout, and it basically displays the entire structure of your form. So you can click on it, select a label, for example, and change its properties. The main difference is that we don't use the Qt property browser. So we use the Visual Studio one. So the Visual Studio property browser will actually display Qt properties. We did this because, first, it was possible, and second, it doesn't confuse people too much. It would be really confusing if you have 2 property browsers and you would have to remember which one is for what. So the one property browser, the Visual Studio one, you would need for changing properties regarding or in your project, like changing Qt versions, changing file names or whatever. And then you would have to switch to the other one, changing properties of your Qt form. So instead, we'll just use one and try to make less confusion. We have the action editor. It's basically also the same one as in Designer, and the signal and slot editor. I will show everything in action in a few seconds. Resource management. So first, why do we have our own one? Our own one means Qt-specific one. The reason for it is, if you would only develop for Windows, then you're totally fine with using RC files, WinRC files. The problem is if you want to port it at one point to another platform, Mac OS, Linux, then you have a problem. That's why we have QRC files. So we exchange everything visible, all visible resources in Visual Studio with our own resource system. You're still able to use an RC file. And in fact, an RC file is still used, but we hide it. Just also not to confuse people. So if you really want to change your application icon to translate strings, which you shouldn't in RC files, then you can still use it. But rather don't do it. The resource editor, hope you can see it, it's basically also embedded, and this looks very much like the one in Designer as well. It's also the same. Okay. So what we will do is basically, on this presentation, we will develop an application from scratch, complete it, export some stuff, and later we will also demonstrate the Eclipse integration. We will import the generated project from Visual Studio into Eclipse and build it again and run it, just to show that it works cross-platform above everything. We saw all kind of class wizards, project wizards. We saw the integrated form editor and the resource system. That are the most visible parts in the Visual Studio integration. But there are a lot of parts which you don't see and you're not supposed to see, but it's actually much more what we do in the background. What we do in the background is basically everything related to managing your project. So we have automated build steps, build rules, custom build rules for UIC, RCC, and mock steps. As you saw, I never said explicitly add a mock step, add a UIC step, generate the QRC file, and so on. What we have in addition is a simple Qt version manager. Usually when you work on Windows or Linux and you have different branches of Qt, or you have Qt 4.1 and 4.2, you want to switch back and forth, what you do is you have for every Qt version, not sure, most people have, I guess, a bash or a shell where they set up all environment variables, and then they start up Visual Studio with using /use-env, that you import all environment settings, and they recompile the project, and so on. So this is quite a lot of work, and the integration helps you with that. The only thing what you have to do in the integration, I'll show it later, is to change a value in a combo box, and it will replace the current Qt version, what it's compiled against or run against. And we also have some functionality of importing and exporting projects. If you start a project in Visual Studio, then it will generate a VC proj file. That's the default for Visual Studio. It will always just operate on Visual Studio files. So there is no profile, no prefile, nothing involved by default. For most people, it's okay because some people just are interested in Windows development, so they're fine. But you get some problems if you want to compile your project on a different platform. That's why we need exporting and vice versa also importing if it comes from Linux, for example. There are a few things which are a little bit tricky, importing and exporting. For example, it's really hard to match all different kinds of Visual Studio flags, compiler flags, link flags, and whatever, and basically write those settings to a profile. It's kind of impossible. The other thing is, if you do it, then those settings don't really make sense to export to a profile either, because on Linux you don't have them, right? So we tried to find a compromise, and what we came up with is basically kind of a strange way, maybe in the beginning. So what we do, when we export a project, we generate two files. We generate profiles. Everybody knows what a profile is, I guess. But we also generate a PRI file. So in the profile, as you can see, we write the very basic settings. So we write template, for example, application, target type, or name of our application later. And then we had, in the end, an include of the prefile we generate. The prefile itself contains only, and should only contain, it's a very simple format, sources, headers, forms. It can also contain Qt resources. But that's all it should contain. Technically, it contains everything. There's no limitation. But for Visual Studio, it should only contain those 4 parts. The reason for that is the first time you export a project in Visual Studio, if you would only generate a profile, then the profile would contain everything, right? So another guy loads it on Linux, and then he figures out, oh, I actually have to add another lib. So he adds, for example, a lib foo.a. So he does it, he submits it, then the Windows guy figures out, okay, I add another file. So he adds another file, he exports it again, and the settings are overwritten. To basically solve this problem is that we never touch in Visual Studio, and you shouldn't touch the profile again after the first time. That's why we have the prefile. So if you add or remove a file, this is all done with a prefile. So then we don't overwrite any sensible data from the profile. That's the approach. In future, maybe we have a really smart parser in Visual Studio as well, which kind of knows that it doesn't override Linux settings and stuff like that. But so far, this is the approach we have. The other nice thing about it is you can select or you can monitor prefiles within Visual Studio. So once you exported a prefile, you can register this prefile or assign it to this project. And whenever this prefile is changed because somebody else added a file or whatever, Visual Studio will tell you and will offer you to update the project. So it will add another file, it will add the mock step to your VC project file and everything. We can quickly show it. So this is our project. In addition, what we provide as well is integrated help. I said in my first slide, or second slide, where I said, why do we need integrations? Because we don't want to switch between several applications. So it doesn't make sense that you use Visual Studio, but to look up help, you always have to go to Assistant, to your online browser, or whatever. So we also integrated the Qt documentation inside the MSDN help collection. So you will find a Qt reference documentation, the normal as you will find in Assistant. In addition, you will find a manual how to use the integration. This integration manual is not available anywhere else. So don't try to find it in Assistant, it's not there. The help is available via contents, index, or search, just as you would expect. And it has some support for context-sensitive help. I can quickly show it. So if your cursor is about QString, you hit F1. Then actually, after some time, it displays the QString reference documentation. So you can browse through whatever. Hitting escape brings you back to your source code. Unfortunately, it does not always work. The parser, which is responsible for the context-sensitive help in C++ in Visual Studio, is quite weak. If your cursor is above a word which is called replace, for example, so it would write name.replace for replacing parts of the string, the likelihood is not very high that it will actually go to QString replace. The problem is the parser doesn't know about types. I'm not sure why they didn't build it, and it's quite ridiculous because they parse the document all the time. They base their code completion on it. So why not making their context-sensitive help also knowing the types? Then it would be much easier for us, but they don't, unfortunately. So if you want this feature, write mails to Microsoft. Okay. Eclipse. We mentioned it yesterday that we were also working on an Eclipse integration. We started out quite some time ago. We had something working pretty fast. Then we dropped it again since we had some issues. Now those guys fixed something, or quite a lot of stuff, so we tried it again. What we provide. Basically, the Eclipse integration has the same features as a Visual Studio integration. Wizards, the integrated designer, integrated resource management. All build steps for you are kind of set up in parentheses or in quotes, because the difference is that the Eclipse integration does not work on a specific project file. Eclipse doesn't have something like that. It operates directly on pro or pre files. So there's no need for exporting or importing or whatever. Just use a normal profile, import it in Eclipse, and it will work. Regarding release, there is nothing finalized. We're still working on it. I have here a version which is just a few days old. Not everything is there. I will present it. When it will be released, we don't know yet. We have a working version for Windows, for Linux, and we're working on Mac, which is pretty much there, but it still needs time.